Hello, everybody. Happy Thursday. Happy New Year. My name is Naman. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Management Consulted. I am really excited for today's session, where we're going to be talking about walking and talking like an executive, specifically building our executive presence as we head full steam into 2024. Welcome to those of you joining us on LinkedIn Live, YouTube Live, Facebook Live, Instagram Live, etc. We're really excited to have you with us as well. And of course, a warm welcome to those of you who are here in the Zoom room with me. I know we've got people trickling in still from all over the world, so I'm going to take just a minute to make three very short but important announcements, and then we're going to dive right into today's content. The first announcement is this. One of the reasons that I'm spending an hour with you today is so that you want to hang out with me and our team more through an executive communication training. I'll be very transparent and blunt with you about that. That's one of the reasons that I do these calls and these trainings. So if throughout today you feel like, hey, you know what? This was good. This was meaningful. This was insightful. This was tactical. My team could use more of this. I could use more of this. Then I'm going to invite you to schedule a call with us to learn more about our executive communication training. We'd love to get to know you. We'd love to get to know your team, your organization, and see if we can help. We do about 200 training sessions a year for dozens and dozens of companies inside the Fortune 500, consulting firms, PE, VC firms, etc. And we'd love to work with you and your team as well. Second announcement. Next month in February, we are going to be doing a part 2 of this training. And part 2 is really going to focus on presentation skills. So today, you'll see in a minute how I'm going to frame executive presence and what we're going to cover and talk about. Today is really only going to be the foundation, and how what a lot of we are talking about today manifests is through the way that you present. And we are going to cover presentation skills through the lens of executive presence next month. So again, if you find today helpful, then sign up for next month's free event where we're going to dive into presentation skills. I'm going to ask some of my colleagues to pop that link in the chat. You can also grab it through the QR code or by grabbing that bit.ly link on the slide. So that's announcement number 2. And for announcement number 3, which I am really stoked about, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Caleb. I'm going to let him introduce himself and talk to you about what's coming to Management Consulted on February 1st.
Hey everyone, Caleb Preston here. I've been building businesses and communities for the last 15 years. I'm super stoked to share an announcement we have coming brand new to the management community ecosystem consulted. And that is we have a new community coming online on February 1st. This is the new management consulted community, and it's the go-to community for aspiring consultants. So you're going to want to be here. There's a quote that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. And if you want to go far, go together. And so this really is a space to bring together all of our management consulting clients that really want that extra mile of connecting with their peers and advancing their career faster. So there's several things going on in here that are really exciting. Anyone that comes in gets to have a one-on-one strategy call with me where we look at what's your plan, what firms you're trying to hire with, look at your resume, and I really connect you with the right resources and people and industry experts to help you speed up your career process. The second thing is we have 6 live trainings every month. So we have intensives of how to write an effective networking email, how to do case math. We really go deep dive into a number of different topics. Hot seat sessions. We hear from actual coaches from McKinsey, Bain, BCG, other firms. These are really valuable member-only live events. And we also have top firms coming into the community. So once a month, we feature a specific firm, come share and have Q&A sessions with them. So this really opens up unlimited possibilities with your network. We have 30 spots open this month. And the way that you get in is you can purchase Black Belt. Now, once those 30 spots fill up, we're done. But if we still have spots available, we're going to open up member-only memberships at $850 a year. You can come get the community that way. But if you buy Black Belt, that $850 a year is free for the first year. So that's by far the better value. So thank you. And I hope to see you inside the new community on February 1st.
Caleb, really excited to have you running this community. I just want to reemphasize, like, if you want like small group and personalized interaction with our team, if you want connections with firms through exclusive info sessions, the community is going to be your place to be. And if you've got more questions on if it's right for you, then feel free to pop those in the chat. And we are happy to schedule a call with you and talk to you about if it's right for you and if it's not right for you. And if it's not right for you, we'll tell you that as well. That's our promise. So you can go ahead and let us know in the chat if you're interested in learning more, and we will figure out a way to get in touch. Thank you so much, Caleb.
Thank you.
All right, y'all. Thanks for sticking with us through the first 5 minutes of announcements. Let's dive into today's session where we're going to be talking about improving our executive presence. And Japheth, if I could just ask you to pop this poll up, we've got a couple of opening questions here. We'd love to get to know, number one, where you're at in your career, and then number two, who you're most often communicating with. So that poll should be up on your screen right now, and I'm going to keep it open for 10 seconds. So Japheth, when the 10 seconds are up, you've got the green light to shut this thing down, and we'll see where we're at. So go ahead and just quickly answer this question, and we'll leave it up for 5 more seconds. I can see responses coming in. We'll share what's happening, where everybody's at, and then we'll use that to inform our conversation today.
All right. We're ending the poll.
I love it.
Sharing the results.
Thank you so much, Japheth. So interesting. Looks like 80% of us are either at the junior or analyst level and or manage a team. So about 40-40 or 50-50 split between those two. And then about a fifth of us on the call manage an organization, a division, or a business unit. Helpful to know that it seems like most of us on the call, or at least a plurality of us, are early career. I'll keep that in mind as we walk throughout today. And it seems like 6 out of 10 of us are interfacing more with internal stakeholders than external stakeholders. So just helpful insight for me as well as we move throughout today. I'll make sure to touch on executive presence for both internal and external stakeholders, though, as we go through our conversation today. So thanks for answering that in a timely manner. I've got one more question for you that I'm going to ask you to utilize the chat to answer. But however you define executive presence, what do you feel your biggest struggle is with it? So whether that's your confidence, whether that's your communication, whether that's the strategic thinking that goes behind executive presence, however you define it, where do you feel like your struggle is? Or what do you want to learn today? And we'll keep this chat open for about 30 to 60 seconds. Would love to just hear from you all what your biggest struggle is, what we can address today before we really dive in. So I'm going to take a minute and just sift through the chat here. So I'm seeing a few people say confidence. Nicholas, I appreciate the depth of detail there. Stuttering or mincing words, not quite saying what you mean the first time. Been there. I think it still happens to everybody. Kelvin, filler words. Yep. I'm on building relationships. Kurt, confidence and communication. Yep. Effective communication. Piyush, I love that. Being seen and heard at a junior analyst level. I'll talk to you about my own experience, both with how I've done that well and how I haven't done that well at really junior levels. Voice, pitch, and tone. Rupa, I love that. We're going to talk about communication today, but voice, pitch, tone, and presentation, we're actually going to touch on next month. So we're going to do a deep dive into those things next month. Jessica, thank you for your honesty. I get nervous. Absolutely. I don't know if that ever 100% goes away, but I'm going to talk today about some strategies that we can use to mitigate that. Just Jeet structuring the conversation. We're absolutely going to talk about that today. Marketing. Yep. Okay. What do you do if you're introverted? Absolutely. Owning the room, Sue. Yep. Gravitas. Okay. Fantastic. Keep them coming. We're going to make sure that we touch on a lot of these themes as we move throughout today. And if you don't feel like I've fully answered your concerns, then we're going to open up some Q&A time at the end. And I'm happy to speak to anything that you feel like I missed. But that's really, really helpful. Let me just share a little bit about who I am just for 30 seconds. Again, my name is Naman. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Management Consulted. I've been at MC for about 8 years. I started my career on Capitol Hill. I'll share more about that in a few minutes. I moved over into a development role in the nonprofit world, which a lot of you know, development is just a fancy term for saying you beg people for money all day. Yep, that's exactly true. So I was in that role for a while and really learned a lot about how executive presence and structured communication can help even in what a lot of people would call a non-business environment, and how executive presence and structured communication can lead to successful outcomes in any type of organization. But one of the reasons I'm really passionate about executive presence is because throughout my career, I've often been one of the youngest people in the room. And so I've had to intentionally focus on building my executive presence so others don't just see that I belong, which is step one, but treat me as an advisor, which has always been my ultimate goal. And so as we move throughout today, I'm going to talk a little bit more about my own background and how I've tried to build my own executive presence to mitigate the fact that I'm often, by decades, the youngest person in the room in a lot of the rooms that I'm in right now. Here's how I'm framing our conversation today. This is an incredibly important topic. I think we all intrinsically understand that, yet I feel like it's not often talked about in a practical manner. And so one of the reasons that I really wanted to do this session today is to change that. So where I want to start today is by defining executive presence so we're all on the same page. And so here's the definition that we're going to be working with today. Executive presence is presenting and carrying yourself like an executive's peer in a professional setting. So that is the foundation from which we're starting. And I think all of us understand that this is what makes up part of the secret sauce, right? That determines why some people get promoted, why some don't, why some people are seen as advisors, and why others are not. When I'm working with service providers where I'm a client, I know that I am drawn to the service provider who's got the best executive presence, not necessarily the provider who's got the best ideas. Even on our team, like I know I'm drawn to people who have better executive presence. I'm more likely to believe them. I'm more likely to take their recommendations as opposed to the people on our team who might just have the best ideas on paper. So content matters, but so does gravitas, so does presentation, so does this often ambiguous thing called executive presence. And so our goal today, our focus today, what I'm going to try and answer for you today is what are some tactical steps we all can take to improve our executive presence? And I'm going to bucket and categorize the tactical tools and tips I'm going to give you into three distinct areas today. And so my key takeaway for you, my recommendation for you is that you should initially target these three focus areas to enhance your executive presence. And if you do, you'll start to see an improvement in your executive presence today. And so the first place that we're going to start is having an executive mindset. The second theme we're going to touch on is preparation. And then the third thing that we're going to touch on today is how to communicate in an executive style. And a lot of you in chat mentioned, okay, the structure of my communication. How do I make sure that that is structured in a way that's compelling, that's clear, that's direct, that's going to be really, really action oriented? We're going to touch on that in chapter 3. And so the first thing we're going to start with is the mindset. So we want to train ourselves to see value in what we bring to the table so that others see that same value. And I know a lot of you in the chat mentioned confidence as being maybe your biggest hangup when it comes to executive presence. And what I found in my own career is that having the right mindset is directly correlated with having confidence. So we're going to start there. Second, we're going to touch on really practical preparation tips, tricks, and strategies to get us ready for major meetings and conversations. Executive presence is a daily practice. It's something that serves us well in our day-to-day work and our day-to-day life, but it really shines through and really matters at certain critical moments. And I'm thinking of key meetings. I'm thinking of key presentations that some of you are facing even here in the next few weeks, where this is going to be critical for you. And one of my takeaways for you today is that some people, it's not that some people are born with executive presence and others aren't. It is not an innate God-given gift, right? It's a skill that grows over time and repetition. Anybody can grow an executive presence, and preparation is a main way that you do that. And then third, we're gonna really hone in on the type of messaging that senior stakeholders respond to. And I'm going to give you the answer right up front. It's top down, it's answer first. So what I'm demonstrating right here, giving you my key takeaway right up front, is a demonstration of what I'm going to expound upon in the third part of our time together today. And we're going to focus on telling top-down, answer-first stories, whether we're building presentations, whether we're having conversations in the hallway, whether we are managing teams. That's the style that we're going to communicate in. Okay, now that you know the roadmap for our time together today, now that you know where we're heading, let's start with pillar 1, which is having an executive mindset and getting yourself in the right headspace. So here's the mindset that I've had to fight over my career to really internalize. And it's this: I bring value into every interaction that I have. Why are we starting with this? Mindset is the foundation for everything else that we're going to discuss for the rest of our time together. Everything flows from thinking about myself and thinking about others in the right way. And the good news for all of us is, at least it's very good news for me, is that we can all change the way that we think. It is possible for every human being on the planet to change the way that we think. So even if I don't have this mindset today, I have the ability to change my mind and change the way that I think about myself. And one of the key tools that I've found to help me do this is actually positive affirmations. And it sounds kind of fruity. It sounds kind of light. It sounds kind of like some of you may be thinking it's BS, and I can understand the extreme that this can go to. But I found this to be really, really helpful in retraining my brain to think a certain way before I walk into specific interactions, before I walk into specific meetings, before I meet with certain people. And so some tactical things that I've done over my career to help train my brain to identify the value that I bring into every interaction. So what do I do? The first thing that I do is I try to identify at least 5 reasons why that person should choose me over someone else, right? If I'm walking into a sales meeting, or I'm in a sales context, or if I'm walking into a meeting where I'm asking for a raise or I'm asking for a promotion, right? There are 5 reasons why I'm a really, really great candidate for what I'm asking for. Or there are at least 5 reasons for why whoever I'm communicating with should believe what I have to say and find real value in it, and not just intellectually believe it, but believe it to the point where they're going to want to action it. And so the first thing that I do is I try to write these down and I try to say them out loud. So one of the things that I found, one of the tools that I found that is key to kind of changing the way that I think is changing what I say. And I've often found that if I change what I say, I'll eventually change how I think and what I think. And so I won't beat a dead horse here, but I found that writing down these positive affirmations, saying them, actually helps create new neural pathways inside of my own brain. And I recently had a conversation with a senior consultant at a top consulting firm, let's call it MBB. This person was coming from a top MBA background, and we had a conversation about just this, right? This consultant was nervous around senior partners, even though she came from an incredibly pedigreed background, even though she had made it through the gauntlet that is the MBB recruiting process. And one of the things that we talked about, one of the things that she needed was this mindset shift of I bring value into every interaction. Even though if you looked at her profile, if you looked at her from the outside, you would think that that's not a person that would struggle with that. That's not a person that would struggle believing that they brought value into every interaction. And it was eye-opening for me just to remind me that this has nothing to do with pedigree, it has nothing to do with background. It's something that we all deal with. And this is one way that I found to really address that for myself. Right? A lot of people call this imposter syndrome. And I found that resetting your beliefs is really the only way to adequately address imposter syndrome. And I dealt with this really, really early on in my career. I first was a fellow, really a glorified intern on Capitol Hill when I was 17, 18 years old. And when I was in that role, I was asked to, on an interim basis, take on a staff level position for 8 to 12 weeks. And I ended up being one of the youngest people in that environment in a staff level position. And I had to do this at a very young age to get myself in the right headspace when I didn't necessarily have the right experience, the right background, the right pedigree. But I had to do this to become a top performer in my role really, really early on. And get used to being by far the youngest person in the room and the person with the least experience, but understanding that I was there to bring a perspective. I was there to add value. I was there to drive forward progress on the initiatives and the projects that we were working on. And I found that this is still helpful for me today. I know that I'm going to go back after this session today and I'm going to critique my performance. I'm going to want to change some of the things that I said. And one of the challenges for me is going to be instead of focusing on the left-hand side of the slide, to focus on the right-hand side of the slide and say, you know what, I'm better at teaching and public speaking today than I was 2 weeks ago, than I was 2 years ago. And I'm going to continue to get better every time that I go about this. And so that's the mindset that I've had to adopt for myself as I've moved throughout my career. And it's the place that I'd recommend you start if you find you're struggling with your own confidence. Okay, so we've got mindset out of the way in terms of one of the pillars to executive presence. Let's now move on to preparation and get a little bit more tactical. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on some of the key moments that we experience inside of our professional lives, big meetings, big presentations, etc., and how to prepare to showcase executive presence inside of these specific interactions. So let's work it through before it really matters. And there's a Greek philosopher, I believe his name is pronounced Archilochus, who said that we don't rise to the level of our expectations, we rise to the level of our training. And so, and I found that to be incredibly true in my own career. I fall back to the level of training and preparation that I've done. I'm not talented enough to walk into a situation without preparing. And I think most of us probably fall into the same boat. So when the pressure is on, our cognitive functions get inhibited. So what I have to do is prepare with the same intensity that I want my actual performance to take on. So what does it mean to prepare in this way? I've broken this out into 4 categories, 4 buckets. So first is mindset. I have to convince myself and trick myself as I'm preparing that I'm facing the same pressure and the same stakes that I'm going to face in the actual meeting, in the actual presentation. So I imagine people, for example, in the room. I put myself in a professional setting, whether it's in my office at home, whether I'm in our management consulted offices, right? I think through where I'm going to be, and I imagine people actually there pushing back on what I'm saying. And I almost simulate the entire conversation, the entire meeting, and see it play out in my mind before it ever plays out in the physical world. So that's number 1. Number 2, I think, is where most of us focus most of the time, right? It's on material, right? We think about our talking points. We think about fleshing out our stories. We think about our theme. And this is absolutely critical. I never, ever walk into a meeting or a presentation having the entire script memorized. It just comes across as robotic, right? It comes across as robotic in an interview, in a meeting, in a presentation. But I do want to have identified what the overall theme and key takeaway of my communication is. I do want to have anecdotes and stories prepared that I can pull out and reference at specific points to make what I'm saying more believable and more relatable. And I do want to have certain talking points prepared, either for a specific slide that I'm presenting or for a specific section of a meeting that I'm in. So that's what I would call adequate preparation versus over preparation, which would be having word for word scripts memorized. Third, I think about presentation. So as I'm walking through my preparation for a particular event, meeting, etc., it actually really, really helps me to be in professional dress. It helps me to be like in my suit coat as I'm preparing. It helps me to be wearing my dress shoes as I'm preparing. It helps me to be in my office moving as I'm preparing. So I'm getting my body ready as well as my mind, and getting myself and tricking myself to think, okay, this is the real thing. Let me simulate this to the best of my ability. And then the last thing that I found is having a kitchen cabinet in your life, whether this is peers at your organization, whether this is a manager who's willing to play an advisory role or a mentorship role in your life, whether this is a spouse or a roommate who's willing to play the role of a mock audience with you. It really helps to create a serious environment, have people apply pressure to you, ask difficult questions of you, poke holes in your story, have you think through what the audience is going to be thinking through. One of the ways that I prepare for any interaction is I sit down and I ask myself the question, so what? Right? And I sat down before this meeting today, and I sat down and I said, so what? That's the question that everybody on this call is going to be asking as they're listening to me talk. They're going to be asking, why does this matter to me? How do I apply this to myself? And if I cannot answer the so what question, then you all are going to be disengaged. You all are going to drop off the call because your time is valuable. So one of the things that I did, and I was actually walking through this story with somebody earlier today, is I had them apply pressure. I had them ask questions, and I had them sit in your seat and think through if this content would be valuable for them. And they were my proxy for you. And so first I thought through it in my own mind, but then I actually went to external advisors, other folks, and had them apply real world pressure so that I could get used to communicating this in front of people and answering some of the questions that we think you are going to have as well. And those of you who know me know that I'm a massive sports fan, used to play sports back when I was younger. And so I found that having a routine ahead of a big meeting, a big interaction is really, really critical. Just like athletes have a routine and a warm-up kind of flow that they go through before every game or meet that they're a part of. And so I found for me that setting up my schedule and my pacing to match what's going to be required on a big day for me is critical. For example, a big part of my job is teaching and instructing. Like I said, we have 200 teaching events that we do a year in every time zone imaginable. And sometimes that means that I have to teach really, really early in the morning or really, really late at night, depending on where our partners are located. And so I found that a day or two before engagements like that, if possible, I try to set up my schedule and my pacing to match what my schedule is going to look like on the day of the performance. So if I have to teach from like 7 to 11 p.m. Eastern, 1 or 2 days for a particular week, then I have to train my brain and my body and my routine ahead of time to be peaking at 7 to 11 p.m. Eastern, when usually that's when I'm just coming down from the high of the workday. And so I have to be intentional about kind of working through that pacing, working through that cadence ahead of time, instead of just kind of relying on coffee to get me through. And so that might be an extreme example for some of you, but hopefully gives you an idea of how you can set up your schedule and your pacing to match what you're actually going to be experiencing on the day of an interview or the day of a big presentation. All right. And again, one of the ways that I find it's really helpful for me to prepare is to get in the same outfit as I'm preparing and really just feel like, okay, I'm working through this like it's the real thing. I'm going to put a timer on and I'm going to see how long it takes me to run through every slide. I'm going to put a timer on and I'm going to see how long it takes me to answer every interview question I'm going to see, because I know that I've got a 30-minute slot. I know that I've got a 60-minute slot. I know that I'm going to have 5 minutes with somebody in the hallway. And if I don't get my message across clearly and directly and in the time that I have, I'm going to miss out on this opportunity. And it's going to be one of the ways that I don't display executive presence, because I'm going to be unclear, because I'm going to have to go back and explain myself, because I'm going to have to start over. And so practicing with a timer, practicing my pacing, the speed at which I talk, the cadence at which I'm going, is a big way that I make sure that when I'm working through the real thing, I've already done it at least once before. Here are a few hacks that I found that are incredibly helpful for me and lead to success outcomes in very, very specific interactions that I have. So first one, I don't drink high caffeine products within 1 hour of any big interaction that I'm going to have. So for example, I made sure before this call that I finished my coffee for the day, and I have multiple cups a day, an hour and a half ago. Right. So that caffeine has worked itself through my system at least a little bit. My heart rate isn't spiking now. It spiked an hour and a half ago. Right. I've got enough adrenaline going through my system just from being here that I don't need the added boost from the caffeine. So that's something really practical that I found helps me just stay in, be energetic while still staying in control. The second thing that I did even before this session today is I went and took a 5-minute walk. Right. So if for those of you who are feeling anxious, those of you who are feeling you have this nervous energy before you have conversations, I know a lot of times we can't always plan out the meetings, the conversations that we have. There are a lot of impromptu things we have to jump on. But when we have something on the calendar, one of the things that I found to be really helpful is just to go take a 5-minute walk and release some of the nerves that I'm feeling physically, right? Take 5 deep breaths, inhale for 10 seconds, exhale for 10 seconds, repeat 5 times, right? Like anxiety is actually sometimes just excess energy that needs to be released. And I'd rather have it be released before a big interaction than during a big interaction. And then third, we've already talked about this. I want to reduce the variability of my outcomes through rehearsal. And so I've talked about the just benefits of practice. And I don't think I need to explain that any further. We all understand that good practice, right practice makes perfect. And then we've already talked through the dangers of writing or memorizing a script versus just having an outline that you can touch on. I've been in a lot of interviews where I've been on the interviewer side of the table, or I've been in a lot of meetings where I've been one of the stakeholders where it's obvious that someone has just memorized a script and it makes them come across as really junior. It makes them come across as not as confident. They thought that they were coming in prepared, but really all they were doing was boring me. Right? Because if you prepared a script and that you were going to read from word for word, why not just give me the script? What added value are you bringing to the interaction? And so the outline allows you to stay on track while ensuring that what you're saying verbally is adding additional value beyond what anything beyond what's written on a slide or beyond what's written in a meeting agenda. Okay. We covered a lot in like 25 minutes. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to just take a 1-minute break. And then what we're going to do is we're going to move on to how we structure our communication. That's going to be the last part of our time together today. We're going to specifically talk about how to structure verbal conversations, how to structure meeting agendas, emails, and presentations as well. Before we get there, if what I said at the beginning of our call resonated with you around like your team working with Management Consulted on executive communication training, then just go ahead and scan the QR code or just pop a comment in the chat so our team can get in touch with you. We train groups. Like I mentioned, we also do one-on-one training for folks at the junior and analyst levels all the way up to the C-suite. So a lot of my time is spent, for example, working with vice presidents of sales and chief revenue officers, working on clarifying their communication and their value propositions, not just for their teams internally, but for external stakeholders. And so if you feel like that type of training, that type of mentorship, that type of sounding board would be helpful for you or helpful for your team, then please let us know. And we'd love to have a short conversation with you. No pressure, no obligation. We're here to help. I'm just going to take a deep breath for myself and take a sip of water. And I'll give you a chance to scan that if you'd like. Okay. Let's end today by talking about how to communicate in an executive style. We're going to be top down. We're going to be answer first 100% of the time. That's my charge to you all coming out of today. Why does this matter? Some of you might have heard me share this before, but for those of you that are new, I want to make sure that you understand this as well. There was a study some years ago published in the Harvard Business Review that really examined what drove the perceived credibility of individuals inside of organizations. It turns out that your credibility and my credibility is driven 76% by the structure of our communication and only 24% by the content of our communication. And what I have found as I work with teams, as I work with individuals, is that we spend 99% of our time thinking about content and 1% of our time thinking about structure. And there is a disconnect between what we spend most of our time on and what actually leads to the credibility that we want to have inside of our organizations, the advisorship that we want to have inside of our professional relationships. So that's why I'm spending today's session and ending today's session talking about structure instead of presentation skills, because this is the biggest driver to your credibility inside of your organization. And we've already talked about what executive presence is. But the way that I know that all of us want to be perceived who are on this call today is we want to be perceived as professional. We want to be perceived as cool and calm and confident and in control. And both things matter, right? A great storyline and then strong delivery that convey those attributes that I just communicated. So what I'm going to talk about today is the storyline aspect of things. And then what we're going to spend our time next month talking about is the delivery aspect of things. But let's get the storyline, the structure right first, and then we'll focus on the delivery. And so this is the top-down structure that I recommend you adopt for all of your communication. This is often known as the pyramid principle. Some of you may be familiar with this, but for those of you who aren't, I'm going to break it down really quickly. First, this top-down approach ensures that our message is direct and clear. And this is applicable for slides. It's applicable for short answers when I'm, for example, in a meeting, and it's applicable for when I'm answering questions inside of an interview. There are multiple use cases for this type of communication style. And what this top-down structure tells us to do is start our communication with what I call an assertion. And an assertion really is just the key takeaway of our communication. Think back to 40 minutes ago when I started this call. I told you right up front, right, why you were here today. You were here today to execute in 3 distinct areas to improve your executive presence. I gave you my key takeaway right at the beginning. And I gave you a secondary key takeaway as well. I wanted you to work with our team on further training, right? I stated that at the very beginning of our time together today. That clarifies why we're all meeting together today. And it makes sure that my message is direct and not lost to misinterpretation, right? If you had stayed on this call just for 5 minutes, you would have known what I was going to talk about today because I walked you through the entire roadmap in that executive summary. You wouldn't have had to stick around till the end to get the punchline. That's the way that executives communicate. Tell me what it is that I'm supposed to know. Tell me what it is that I'm supposed to believe. Tell me what it is that I'm supposed to do up front so that I remain engaged. So you're going to start with the main idea of your communication. The next thing that you're going to do is you are going to support that main idea with curated pieces of supporting rationale. So I'll use this presentation as a continuing example. There are probably 27 things that you could do to improve your executive presence. Like what we're talking about today is not exhaustive, but I do not have the time and you do not have the attention span for us to walk through all 27 things you can do to improve your executive presence. I had to think through what are the top 3 reasons, what are the top 3 ways that you can improve your executive presence. And I had to put them into this really short, curated story that I thought would resonate with you. So our goal when we're putting these executive level stories together is not to include all of the reasons why someone should do something and not to include all of the ways that they can do something. It's to identify the top reasons. It's to identify the top ways that they can execute on your main idea. I subscribe to the rule of 3s, which is that for each piece of communication that I'm going to put together, I'm going to have a maximum of 3 supporting points of rationale to support my key takeaway. Why 3? Well, if you look through history, you'll find that human beings for thousands of years have been telling stories in 3-act structures, all the way back to the ancient Greeks and even before, right? And that carries through to today. You look at Broadway, you look at Hollywood, the way that we are wired to respond to stories often is in 3-act structures. And if you think through things that you have memorized, whether they're phone numbers, whether they're credit card numbers, you'll find that you probably have those numbers memorized in sets of 3 to 4 digits. we're wired to retain information in sets of three. And one of my big challenges whenever I'm communicating with a senior stakeholder is that often they have the attention span of a fly. Right? And so how can I be really, really clear about what my key takeaway is, and then give them just the top reasons why that's the right key takeaway, and leave it at that. I'm not going to overwhelm them with volume. I'm going to lean more on quality over quantity. And then underneath each point of supporting rationale, which really, if you think about it, is a chapter of your story, you have specific data and facts that support that point of rationale. So when you take a top-down communication approach, I am not telling you not to be data-driven. I am just telling you not to be data-heavy. It's the best story that often wins the day, not the best data, not the best idea. And if you look through people that you, or think through people that you admire, think through people that you think have great executive presence, people whose communication resonates with you, you'll find that the commonality, the thread between all of them is the fact that they know how to tell a story in a way that you can follow. That takes precedence over burying our audience in data and facts. People aren't logical. We use data somewhat to inform our decisions, but most people in most businesses that I've ever worked with, including executives and senior leaders, are not as data-driven as they would like to think. And emotion and gut feel plays a big part. Resonance with a story plays a big part in how decisions are made. And I'll talk more about that on the next slide. And so inside of each chapter of my story, again, I'm not going to include all the facts that I could include to support that part of the story. I'm going to include what I think are the top facts, the right data that will get my stakeholder to a decision point. My goal in executive communication is not to prove that I'm right, is not to prove that I'm smart, is not to prove that I've done a lot of work. My goal is to give you enough information to buy into what I'm selling. My goal is to tell a story that's going to motivate action. And so when I have a different goal, I can take a different approach like this. All right, let's talk about the top layer of that pyramid, what I called the assertion. And if this is new to you and you're like, okay, I like this, it's resonating with me, I need to go practice it, I need to go think through how this is going to apply to my situation, that's great. Start just with the assertion. Like as you are building presentations, as you are writing emails, as you are preparing answers for interview questions, as you are in conversations in the hallway, if any of you are working on site, right? Like think through, okay, how can I elevate the main idea, the key takeaway of what I'm communicating to the very top of my message? Let me start there. And here's why that's so critical. Because assertions establish a voice of authority and keep our audience's focus. And one of the goals that I saw consistently listed in the chat at the beginning of our time together today was, if I could summarize and paraphrase, is I want people to listen to what I'm saying. I want them to take it seriously. I want them to action it. And assertions are one tool that you use to get there, to establish that voice of credibility and authority that you want to have with your stakeholders. And so here's the way that I think about using assertions or not using assertions. So the non-assertion, the non-top-down way of communicating is like going to a McDonald's or any other fast food restaurant. When you walk into a McDonald's, you see this really, really large menu. And outside of McDonald's telling you that you should get fries and a drink with a meal, they're not pointing me in any specific direction. Like they're not telling me, hey, like we recommend you should eat this today or that today. There are 30 options on the menu, and I just go there and I look at the menu board and I'm like paralyzed. I'm stuck, right? Because I'm like, I don't know if I want the Big Mac or the chicken nuggets or the all-day breakfast or the third variation of the quarter pounder that they've come up with this year, right? It's like it's overwhelming, right? And I certainly don't ask the person behind the counter, hey, what's good here? I don't ask them, hey, what do you think I should have for lunch today? They are not playing the role of an advisor. They do not have a voice of authority inside of that environment. Their job is to facilitate a transaction, right? They tell me, hey, your meal will be $12.99 today. And because their job is just to facilitate an exchange of data, it can be automated away, right? A machine can tell me that my meal will cost $12.99. Right? Contrast that with walking into a Michelin star restaurant. Right? I'll walk into a nice restaurant. It's, by the way, isn't it amazing? They're asking me to spend like 50 or 100 times more than what McDonald's is asking me to spend, yet they give me less information to do it. I have a limited menu of options. It's a 2-page menu instead of like an 8-page menu at McDonald's. Right. And I found this holds true at senior levels inside of organizations as well. The higher value the decision is, the faster it's made because it needs to be made quickly. And often the less volume of data is used to make those higher value decisions. Like people will go 24 rounds about what snacks should be in the break room, but will move really, really quickly on $100 million decisions. Because one is more urgent and pressing than the other. And so back to our Michelin star restaurant, right? I have a limited menu of options, yet even from that limited menu of options, I rely on my waiter or my waitress to be an advisor in that environment. It's a really normal question for me to ask the waiter or the waitress, hey, what's good here? Hey, do you recommend this or that? Hey, if I get the ribeye, can you pair a red wine with it? Hey, if we order these 8 plates for the table, can you course them out? I am reliant on the expertise of the waiter or the waitress, and they make or break my experience inside of the restaurant. Like I've often walked out of a nice restaurant, like talking to people in my party saying, wasn't that waiter or waitress, like, weren't they great at their job? Like, weren't they amazing? You know, in fact, one time our team walked out of a nice restaurant in Nashville and like, at dinner, we offered the waiter a job because he was that good at communicating and that good at playing the role of an advisor. And we walked out incredibly impressed by the way that he played that role. And so that's a normal reaction to have walking out of a nice restaurant. It is thinking that the expertise and the recommendations that the waiter or the waitress made, they influenced your experience. I've never, ever once walked out of a McDonald's thinking, wow, that cashier was great at their job. And so my job, my role when I'm communicating is to be that waiter or that waitress. It's to serve my stakeholders a limited menu of information. And it's to take an advisory stance. It's to say, hey, I'm closest to the data. Hey, this is what you pay me to look at. This is what you pay me to pay attention to. Here's what I think we should do as a result of what I found. I am not dumping data in your lap and saying, hey, here you go, make the decision. I'm coming to you and I'm saying, here's the decision we should make. Here's what the key takeaway should be, and here's why. I've identified the top 3 reasons why this is true and why this is the right thing for us to do at this time. That's the experience I want my stakeholders to have when they interact with me. It's very similar to what a waiter or a waitress does inside of a fine dining establishment. I just had somebody on our team yesterday send me a bunch of good ideas, like an Excel file with like 1,000 rows of data, whatever, and said, here you go. Here's what I think we should do with this, right? They said, here you go. Do with this what you will, right? And I wrote them back and I said, I'm not going to do anything, right? Here's what would make a really valuable addition to this conversation. is if you came to me and you said, based on this data, based on your ideas, like, here's what I think we should do next and why. And I punted the conversation back to this individual on our team. And if you find that you are not getting the buy-in, that you are not motivating the action that you think you should be when you're inside of meetings, when you're inside of these conversations, it may be that you're not putting a stake in the ground and saying, here's what I think we should do and here's why. So I would strongly recommend that you start to do that. You start to be more assertive in the conversations that you're having. And one of the reasons that I feel really confident making that assertion to you is because I hear from senior leaders across industries, consulting and otherwise, and on an almost daily basis. And the consistent thing that they tell me is that I want to hear the perspective of my people. I am tired of people coming to me with just a whole lot of detail, a whole lot of information with no perspective layered on top of it. And what they've told me they're looking for is, tell me what you think I should do and why. Don't just transfer knowledge to me. That's what my team member did yesterday. They transferred a lot of knowledge to me. It was 1,000 rows of Excel data worth of knowledge. But what they didn't do is help me apply it, right? And what I'm looking for is someone who's going to help me apply the knowledge. What your stakeholders are looking for is someone who's going to help them apply the knowledge that you have. And ultimately, what I'm looking for, and ultimately what I think you're looking for inside of your organization, is to get to a decision point faster, right? I think we're all collectively, as a corporate America, frustrated by being in endless meetings and endless discussions and not moving quickly enough on the priorities that we have, not making decisions fast enough. If you want to do your part to get the team unstuck, then come to an interaction, come to a conversation with a proposed action. It'll clarify all the information you share afterwards. And it'll help move people to decision points, right? Come to an interaction and say, the reason we're here today is because I want you to do something. And here's why I think it's the right thing for us to do. And I'm going to walk you through why here over the next 10 minutes. I guarantee you, your stakeholders will pay attention in a different way to the information that you share. When you've told them up front, you're going to ask them to do something at the end. So there you have it. My intro to executive communication and executive presence. Mindset, preparation, and then communication structure. And what we're going to do next time in February, and again, I'll ask my team to pop the link in the chat for that session, is talk about how to communicate the stories that we put together. We'll talk about verbal cues. We'll talk about nonverbal cues. We'll talk about eye contact. We'll talk about how to command a room, things like that. But those tactics are much more powerful when they're paired with a powerful story. And so spend more of your time putting the right story together and then augment the right story with those presentation skills that we're going to discuss next time. So we've got about 5 minutes left in our session today. We're right on time. And what we're going to do is we're going to open it up for a little bit of Q&A and discussion. And so I'm actually going to turn this part of the call over to Japheth. Japheth, if there are questions that you've been addressing in the chat that you think would be good for us to talk about verbally, then I'm more than happy to speak to those. Or if there are questions coming in now that you think would be good for the whole group to hear an answer to, we can address those as well. I'll let you lead us from here.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Naman. All right, folks, go ahead and type in your questions in the chat. We'll get to as many as we can in the next 4 or 5 minutes here. I did see a question a little bit ago from Jazjeet, and I might need a little bit of clarification on this, Jazjeet. The question is, can you share an example scenario in a conversation where you don't have a slide deck? How would you use the top-down approach in a conversation like that?
That's a great question. Couple things that I do. I use numbers in my communication a lot when I don't have a visual aid. So, for example, I'll say, hey, Japheth, thanks so much for meeting today. I know that your time is really, really valuable. Here's what I'd like to discuss today. And here's why I think it's important and the right thing for us to discuss. Right. And I've got 3 reasons why. First, A. Second, B. Third, C. How does that sound to you? I use that type of language to set an agenda. And to me, in those types of conversations, in those types of interactions, the number one way that you can display executive presence is by taking command of the conversation by setting an agenda and saying, I've come to this conversation with a plan. I've come to this conversation with something really concrete I want to get out of it. Here's why I think it's the right approach for both of us. And then, right, I can open that up for feedback and say, Japheth, does that sound good to you? So that's how I would approach that.
Amazing. Thank you, Naman. We've got loads more questions coming in, so let me just go right through them. All right. Alina is asking for how you approach situations where you don't have the foresight or the time to prepare in advance for them. Do you have any insight into that?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, Alina, my answer is a little bit similar. When I'm walking into a conversation where the needs or the goals of my stakeholders are a little bit ambiguous because I haven't had the chance to prepare, then I do a couple of things. The first thing that I do is I share historical context or background. Where have we come from? I then share a challenge that I'm facing today that I want us to solve together. And then I say, based off of that historical background, based off of that challenge we're facing, here's the question I'd like to answer today. And I align everybody around the question that we're there to address. And you'll get really, really good feedback if you follow that approach in that format, because that'll uncover what people really care about and what they really want to talk about inside of that interaction. So try and align everybody around the question that you're there to address, the focus area of the meeting first. And then once you've got alignment on the focus area, put a stake in the ground and say, here's where I think the answer lies, and here's where I'd like to start our conversation. That'll help you get better feedback from your stakeholders. Like I always get better feedback when I come to a meeting or a conversation and I say, here's what I think we should do, even if I don't really think it's what we should do, right? Like, because people respond differently to a concrete recommendation than they do to like an open-ended discussion. So one of the ways that you move the conversation forward is by actually being the first one, being a little bit brave and bold to put a stake in the ground and say, here's where I think the answer could lie. Can we start with this hypothesis?
Amazing. All right. Nicholas has a great question here about interviews. How do I get better at listening for tells? I struggle in interviews when interviewers give me subtle hints to try and redirect me, and I miss them because I'm nervous.
Nicholas, that's such a good question. So there are a few tells that I've found to be consistent in my experience interviewing. The first one is when the interviewer makes like a grunt, right? Like, and I think this like takes some practice to pick up on. I think that's where like interviewing with like friends, peers, our coaches can be really, really helpful. But I know that I've experienced a lot when I'm saying something and someone goes, right? When I'm saying something and someone's like facial expression changes, like I've trained myself to identify, okay, I think that's a manifestation of their disagreement, or I think that's a manifestation of them thinking about something more because they're not sure if they believe what I'm saying. And so a couple of ways to get better at listening for tells is number one, put yourself in the mock interview environment where like the focus of that session is not necessarily the content of your communication, but the entire focus of the session is built on raising your awareness, right? Where, for example, if you were working with me, like I would walk you through 4 or 5 ways that I would show you that I'm trying to redirect you, and we'd see if you picked up on them. And if you didn't, we'd go back and we'd do it again. And we would just go through this practice of you picking up on different cues. Some of it's listening, but some of it is also looking, right? And so specifically in case interviews, one of the traps that people fall into is they spend so much of their time writing or looking down at their paper that they miss the visual cues that their interviewer is giving them. And so practicing kind of referring to your paper as a guide, but not leaning on it as a crutch, but actually having a conversation with your interviewer is critical to case success. And it's one of the ways where if you're in a case interview specifically, you're going to do a better job of picking up on some of those tells. I hope that was helpful, and please ask a follow-up if not.
Awesome. Well, I want to honor everyone's time today. So, Naman, I think that's a great place to land the plane.
I love it. Well, everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate your time. And again, we look forward to seeing you inside the community. We look forward to seeing you in a future management consultant training. Happy New Year again.